Imagine a seemingly perfect Tuesday afternoon in Richmond, one of London's most affluent and peaceful boroughs. The sun is shining, the streets are bustling with the gentle rhythm of daily life, and a young mother is walking down the pavement, holding the small hand of her 3-year-old son. She has just collected him from nursery, a routine familiar to parents everywhere. But the tranquility of this moment is a facade. The roar of engines shatters the calm as 2 motorcycles swerve through the traffic, mounting the pavement to block their path. They aren't passing by. They are hunting. A figure, their face obscured by a dark helmet, dismounts and lunges toward the mother. The grip on her arm is forceful enough to leave lasting physical marks, but it is the words spoken next that leave a scar far deeper than any bruise. The assailant issues a chilling ultimatum: "Give me your rings. I'm going to harm your child and take him away." This was not merely a theft. It was an act of psychological terror. The perpetrators knew exactly which buttons to push to ensure compliance, weaponizing a mother's deepest instinct to protect her young. This heart-wrenching encounter wasn't an isolated incident of bad luck. It was a calculated strike by what investigators would later identify as the most sophisticated criminal network operating in the capital in decades. In fact, this single group was so prolific, so integral to the city's crime ecosystem, that when authorities finally dismantled their operation, moped-enabled crime across the entire city plummeted by a staggering 52% overnight. It sounds like a detail from a dystopian novel, but it is a documented reality. This case exposes something far more sinister than opportunistic street theft. It reveals a level of organization that rivals legitimate corporations. To understand the gravity of this situation, we must look at the state of London between 2017 and 2018. The city felt like it was under siege. The statistics from this era are difficult to comprehend. Every single day, approximately 74 crimes involving mopeds were reported. The average is out to 1 incident every 90 minutes. Mobile devices were snatched from hands mid-call, luxury watches were stripped from wrists, and bags were cut from shoulders with surgical precision. The metropolis had inadvertently become the global epicenter for this specific brand of chaos, surpassing even Naples and Barcelona in terms of frequency and severity. For the average citizen, the police seemed powerless to stop it. Traditional pursuit vehicles were rendered obsolete against the agility of high-powered scooters that could weave through gridlocked traffic or disappear down narrow pedestrian alleyways. But as the fear grew, so did the mystery. Why London? And why now? What made this specific group different from the chaotic snatch-and-grab artists of the past? As we peel back the layers of this investigation, we find that these weren't just reckless joyriders. They were disciplined, they were strategic, and they were led by a mind that treated crime not as a desperate act, but as a military campaign. At the center of this sprawling criminal web sat a man who defied every stereotype of the common street thief. Terry Marsh, a 32-year-old resident of Fulham, was not merely a participant in the chaos. He was its architect. In a world where most criminals are apprehended due to careless mistakes or loose tongues, Marsh operated with the discipline of a field commander. Investigators discovered that he managed his communications through a rotating inventory of 3 mobile handsets and 20 distinct SIM cards, cycling through them constantly to frustrate electronic surveillance. This wasn't the behavior of an opportunist looking for a quick score. These were counter-surveillance protocols, usually reserved for state operatives or intelligence assets. It forces us to ask a disturbing question: where does a local criminal acquire the operational knowledge that would impress a government agency? The answer to that question would have to wait, because on New Year's Eve 2017, Marsh was ready to demonstrate exactly what his network was capable of. While the rest of London was preparing to count down the final seconds of the year, distracted by fireworks and celebrations, Marsh's crew was gearing up for a precision strike. Their target was High Street Kensington, an area synonymous with wealth and luxury. The clock ticked past midnight. The streets were largely deserted. The city's attention turned toward the Thames. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the screech of tires as a stolen Range Rover tore around the corner, serving as the battering ram for a convoy of mopeds trailing in its wake. They slammed into the storefront of Ultimus Limited, a high-end retailer of outdoor apparel. In a matter of moments, the glass was shattered, and the team swarmed the interior. They stripped the racks of premium Canada Goose jackets, items that retail for up to $2,000 apiece. By the time law enforcement could respond to the alarms, the group had vanished into the night, leaving nothing behind but broken glass and an empty inventory. However, it was what happened next that truly separated Marsh from the average gang leader. Most crews would retreat into the shadows after such a lucrative haul, waiting for the heat to die down. Marsh did the opposite. Less than a month later, he ordered a strike on the exact same location. But this time, the stakes were higher. A security guard was present. A man simply trying to earn a living and protect the property he was hired to watch. When the gang arrived, they didn't just bypass him. They subjected him to a severe physical attack. The encounter was intense and unforgiving. The guard was forcibly removed from the premises and left on the pavement with significant trauma to his head and extensive injuries across his body. The physical wounds were grave, but the psychological impact was even more devastating. In later court testimonies, the victim revealed that the event had fundamentally altered his life, leaving him with a deep-seated fear of returning to work and a constant sense of vulnerability. This escalation proved that the group was willing to inflict serious harm to achieve their goals, transitioning from property crime to acts of severe violence. Yet, even this brazen attack was just a prelude. The gang was about to target an event watched by millions, in a move so audacious it would leave detectives stunned. On March 22, 2018, the banks of the River Thames were lined with spectators for one of Britain's most prestigious sporting traditions, the Oxford versus Cambridge boat race. As millions tuned in globally, the BBC had deployed a vast array of specialized broadcasting equipment to capture every stroke of the oars. But amidst the cheering crowds, another group was watching, not for the sport, but for the opportunity. Marsh's network had studied the event. They understood the security protocols, the positioning of the cameras, and crucially, where the blind spots lay. This wasn't a spontaneous raid. It was a mission that required precise intelligence gathering. At 2:00 p.m., near Putney Bridge, the tranquility was shattered. Two mopeds, carrying riders armed with industrial angle grinders, mounted the pavement. An off-duty police officer, Stephen Wagstaff, witnessed the commotion and courageously stepped in to intervene. The reaction from the riders was immediate and ferocious. One accelerated directly toward him, while another brandished the spinning power tool as a weapon, screaming promises of fatal consequences if he didn't back down. Wagstaff stood his ground, forcing the gang to retreat empty-handed. But what seemed like a victory for law enforcement was actually proof of the gang's relentless determination. Exactly 1 hour later, in a different location along the race route, they struck again. This time, there was no intervention. They successfully detached and absconded with a specialized BBC camera unit, valued at an eye-watering $180,000. This theft raises uncomfortable questions. A piece of broadcasting technology at that price point is not something you can sell at a local pawn shop. It is serialized, trackable, and useless to the average person, or to steal. Such an item suggests they already had a buyer lined up, likely an international contactor, a sophisticated method of stripping it for high-value components. It was the clearest signal yet that this group was operating with a business model far more complex than simple street robbery. However, while the camera heist showcased their technical audacity, it was a harrowing event 3 months later that would ultimately become their undoing. On June 21, 2018, the gang returned to Richmond, targeting Phoebe Rule and her young son. As we touched on earlier, John McFadyen, a 24-year-old associate of the network, accosted the mother with threats against her child. But this time, the eyes of the city were watching. CCTV cameras captured the terrifying moment the mother was forced to drag her 3-year-old into live traffic to escape the assailants. Nearby construction workers, witnessing the distress, rushed the gang with scaffolding poles, chasing them away. The footage of this near-tragedy found its way onto social media and spread like wildfire. High-profile figures shared the clip, and millions of citizens viewed the raw reality of London's crime wave. The public outrage was deafening. It was no longer a statistic, it was a visceral example of the danger lurking on every corner. What the public didn't know was that Operation Fieldhouse, the police investigation into the gang, had already been quietly running since February. The viral nature of this attack didn't just anger the nation. It forced the detectives to accelerate their timeline, pushing for a decisive end to the reign of terror. The sheer pressure generated by public outrage and the relentless surveillance of Operation Fieldhouse eventually forced the gang into a corner. On May 7, 2018, the cracks in their disciplined facade finally shattered in spectacular fashion. It began with a robbery involving a sharp object, but it quickly escalated into one of the most chaotic pursuit scenarios London law enforcement had ever witnessed. 3 key members of the network, Omar Tafat, Josh Strong-Myers, and Kian Taylor, attempted to flee the scene. In a display of panic, or perhaps supreme arrogance, all 3 piled onto a single moped, initiating a 90-minute pursuit that would tear through 10 different London boroughs. This was not a simple evasion, it was a rampage. Pursued by police motorcycles, K9 units and air support, the trio drove with a terrifying disregard for public safety. At the height of the madness, they merged onto the A40, driving against the flow of traffic directly into oncoming cars. It was a miracle that this act of recklessness resulted only in terrified drivers swerving to avoid collision, rather than a catastrophic loss of life. Incredibly, amidst this high-speed chaos, the gang members were filming themselves, capturing the pursuit for social media clout, a digital footprint that would later serve as irrefutable evidence against them. The chase finally concluded when the overloaded moped lost control and crashed near South Ealing Cemetery, a poetic end to their dangerous run. The arrest of these 3 individuals provided the Metropolitan Police's Trident proactive team with the final pieces of the puzzle. By seizing their devices, investigators could finally map the digital nervous system of the organization. The analysis of phone data was exhaustive, revealing the intricate connections between 12 distinct defendants. These weren't isolated cells. They were a cohesive unit, sharing resources, vehicles, and intelligence. When the raids were finally executed in July 2018, authorities found caches of stolen goods, significant quantities of cash, and the tools of their trade. The impact was immediate. With just these 12 individuals removed from the equation, moped-enabled crime across the entire capital dropped by 52 within a year. It is a staggering statistic that proves how a small, highly organized group can disproportionately terrorize a city of 9 million people. In May 2019, at Kingston Crown Court, Judge Georgina Kent handed down sentences totaling 67 years. Terry Marsh, the mastermind, received over 13 years. It was a victory for justice, yet a disturbing mystery remained. Conservative estimates placed the value of the gang's stolen goods, from luxury coats to high-end electronics and broadcasting equipment, at well over $300,000. Yet, when police turned out their pockets and raided their safe houses, they recovered only $6,000 in cash. Where did the rest of the money go? How does £250,000 vanish without a trace? The discrepancy points to a sobering reality. Operation Fieldhouse may have cut off the hand, but the body of the beast remains active. The sophistication of their money laundering suggests connections to transnational criminal networks capable of moving illicit funds beyond the reach of British authorities. The names of co-conspirators mentioned in sealed court documents remain redacted, and the channels used to fence items like the BBC camera remain unknown. As peace returned to the streets of Richmond, the uncomfortable truth lingers: this wasn't just a London gang. It was a local franchise of a global industry that is still very much in business.